Paul tipped off the paparazzi moments before the high-speed chase which led to the fatal crash in Paris. The claims made in the police report into the tragedy, which also killed Dodi Fayed. And last night it was revealed to GMTV that the investigation into Diana's death is continuing, despite recent press reports that the case has been closed. This from our Europe correspondent Lucy van den Broel in Paris.
Revealed in the police report, the fact that Mercedes driver Henri Paul alerted photographers to the departure of Diana and Dodi from the Ritz, a move confirmed by an employee of the hotel. What's not known is Henri Paul's motive for the tip-off.
The first possibility is that Henri Paul has given this information to the photographers in order to allow them to do their job. And the second possibility is that he gave them this information to distract them from the main car.
Police also have the testimony of a second Ritz employee who spoke out against his boss's wishes to confirm that Henri Paul had been drinking heavily that night. What's missing from the report is the identity of the Fiat Uno driver who caused the Mercedes to swerve in the tunnel. But police do now have a description. The man in his 40s had a large dog in the back of the car. The hunt for that man goes on. Lawyers for the photographers are confident that manslaughter charges against their clients will now be dropped. But the inquiry continues. Magistrates will re-interview key witnesses next month in groups to check for discrepancies in their statements. Lucy van den Broel, GMTV News, Paris.
A £300 car bomb has been suspected took off from Cape Canaveral without any problems. Yesterday's launch was delayed for 24 hours because of technical difficulties. The robot will search for the presence of water on the moon's surface, which could lead to a lunar space station being built. Early figures show the number of people drinking and driving over Christmas rose significantly. 12 hours
represented not only a giant leap for mankind, but a triumph for NASA to be first to land a man on the moon. But tightened budgets and faltering interest in the 70s forced NASA to concentrate its efforts on sending unmanned probes to Mars and outer planets. Then, in 1994, a military satellite thrilled scientists with the possibility of a permanent base in space. It picked up unusual reflections on the moon, thought to be water ice, vital for supporting a lunar base. Now, a quarter of a century later, the Lunar Explorer marks the space agency's return to the moon, and if water is found, it could herald a new era of manned missions to the Earth's closest satellite.
Well, we're now joined by Dr. Andrew Coates from the Mullard Space Science Laboratory at University College London. Good morning to you.
Morning.
Why are we all so fascinated, particularly our director, with the moon?
Well, the moon, of course, is our nearest celestial neighbour, and it's relatively easy to get there. The spacecraft, which was launched this morning, will actually get there this weekend, and so that is really quick in terms of actually getting to a planetary body. There are a number of things we don't understand about the moon, despite the fact that people have landed on it and so on. In particular, just the equatorial belt was actually explored in the past. But there are three things really which Lunar Prospector is going to be looking at. First of all, it's going to be looking at resources on the moon, in particular this question of is there water there. The second question, it's going to be looking at the origin of the moon, which is a very interesting question. Where did the moon come from? Did it form at the same time as the Earth, or was it knocked off the early forming Earth due to a collision? The third thing it's going to look at is the structure of the moon. Does the moon have an internal core, and those sorts of questions.
Is it right that if they find ice and therefore water on the moon, that there's every chance you can set up a mission there?
That would be a possibility, yes. I mean, the idea of having ice towards the poles of the moon is quite an interesting idea which has been around for a while. The moon basically orbits such that the face which we see faces towards the Earth all the time, but that surface heats up, of course, with the sun, so any water which would be on the surface in the equatorial zone would actually be lost. But there is the possibility of having water at the poles, in craters at the holes. In fact, at the South Pole was an extremely deep crater, which is 12 kilometres deep, which is actually larger than Mount Everest on Earth. That would be about 11 kilometres from sea level, something like that. So it's a huge crater, and it's always in shadow from the sunlight, and so there is the possibility of having ice there. Now, that ice could be very interesting because it could be formed from comets, which have come and bombarded the moon during the early formation of the solar system, so it could be very interesting in itself.
But manned missions are a thing, they are possible, and we could send a certain person jabbering away in my ear to the moon.
The moon is certainly the most accessible target for manned space flight. There is a question of whether we actually need to send people, even your director, to the moon, because it is possible to actually do it by robot probes. So, the probe which has gone now is in fact a robot explorer, and it's going to be doing the explorations which it can do remotely. Technology has moved on a lot since the Apollo days. We can actually do a lot more with the microprocessors, with the sensors now available, and we can answer these key scientific questions which there are about the moon without having to send somebody to it.
All right, I'll advise you, there is a way out of this building without going anywhere near our director. I suggest you take it. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
And would you have to have a postcode if you had lived on the moon? MO3 or whatever. 6:46.